Welcome to the Pappy Boynton Veterans Digital Museum Project. In this episode, we honor the memory of Bill and Dolores Gillett and their family from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. This is a good example of how interesting stories can be saved from oblivion. In 2011, a Coeur d'Alene Press newspaper article about our museum caught the attention of the Gillett family. Bill and Dolores' son Steve contacted me and asked if we would be interested in some World War II photos and other items belonging to his late father that they had found after he passed away. Of course, we said. Steve arrived later with his wife Penny and his mother Dolores. He had a large Ziploc baggie full of items he mentioned on the phone. They had been stored away for 65 years, as Bill Gillett rarely mentioned his World War II service. In fact, Bud Oakland, a salty Navy World War II veteran himself, that hunted and cut firewood with Bill for 40 years, didn't even know that Bill had been in the service until he saw Bill's display at the museum. He was shocked and said, "Well, we go to hell, that's Bill Gillett." Bud served on destroyers in the Pacific Theater during the war. So, here the Gillett family stood watching me carefully remove the priceless relics from the plastic bag, one item more precious than the last. Out came two silk survival maps that had been folded for 65 years. These were issued to aircraft members in case they had to bail out and find their way back to Allied lines. They were made out of expensive silk because they were waterproof and more durable than paper charts. Each chart was pristine except for various red pen marks. I soon discovered that those pen marks represented bombing targets. I knew this because Bill had saved his flight logs for all of his airtime, which included 18 combat missions over Nazi-occupied territory, while being a tail gunner of a B-24 of the 702nd Squadron of the 445th Bomb Group of the vaunted 8th Air Force, which was stationed in Tibetum, England. As I continued to extricate items, I was amazed to see actual recon photos and personal pics Bill had taken on combat missions. But the real big find was a small notepad in which Bill had taken notes about each mission. As I pieced everything together, I discovered there were notes about a bombing mission to Magdeburg, Germany, the official recon photos of that mission, and the corresponding red mark on the survival map. This combination is probably the only one of such combinations in existence. Crew members were forbidden to keep any of these items or to take personal cameras on missions, so these are extremely rare. The notebook also has names and addresses of his Air Corps buddies, some of whom are probably in a personal photo of Bill showing a bulletproof piece of glass from his gun turret with 11 hits of it from flak. That glass saved his life. Some of the photos show the 445th B-24s over the Alps, some dropping bombs over the target, and one has Bill seated in his gun turret. One sad note about the 445th. On September 27, 1944, it acquired the horrific record for the most aircraft lost in a single day in U.S. aviation combat history. Of the 35 aircraft on the mission, only 4 returned safely to England. This had to weigh on Bill's mind as he entered hostile territory and as he waited for deadly flak and enemy fighters. The viewer might see a copy of the movie 12 O'Clock High, starring Jimmy Stewart's friend Gregory Peck, to get some idea of what these guys went through. Bill also made a poignant comment in his notebook about dropping bombs on the beautiful land and peoples below him. It's no wonder combat veterans are reluctant to talk about their experiences. But it is our task to show the humanity of this most destructive element of civilization, not just to preserve artifacts and war stories. I asked Dolores, Bill's widow and wife of over 50 years, how they met and what they did in Coeur d'Alene. She said they met in the Twin Falls area after the war, married, and then moved to Coeur d'Alene, where they had 2 restaurants. I asked her which ones, and she said the Arctic Circle drive-ins. I was pleasantly surprised, as the Arctic Circles were the place to cruise in the 60s and 70s. They were the American graffiti places in Coeur d'Alene. Hot rod heaven. I then asked her about any hobbies Bill had, and she said he liked to shoot. I said Idaho has great hunting, so that's understandable, but she said he liked to shoot skeet. I responded by saying, oh, like the skeet club over at Pappy Boynton Field, which was less than a quarter of a mile away from the museum. She said, yes, that's the one, and in fact, Bill was the first club president. So I went over to the club to get info about Bill, and it turns out they had a wall of ex-presidents that weren't labeled. Nobody knew anything about him. I walked up to one of the unmarked photos and said, well, here's Bill Gillett, your first president. Now there's a nice spot on the wall honoring him at the club. There's more to the story that we'll talk about in the future episode, but I'll end with an interesting anecdote. After the museum was up and running for a few years, we had one of the many tour buses come by from the retirement homes in Spokane. Most of the seniors were widows in their 80s and 90s, but there were a couple of old boys in the mix. One fellow in his 90s just sat on the sideline smiling and enjoying the tour. At one point I mentioned that Bill Gillett was in the 445th Bomb Group. At that point he quietly said, I was in the 445th. You could have heard a pin drop. Not quite believing what I said, really? Calmly said, he was a B-24 co-pilot in the 445th. I said that Bill had a 445th memory book in the display, so I took the glass cover off of the display case and handed the book to the gentleman whose name was Ben Cooper. Well, we're here with Ben Cooper, and we just discovered that he was a pilot in the 445th Bomb Group, the same group as Bill Gillett. So this is a pretty special moment here for the museum, and he's looking at this book of the 445th that belonged to Bill Gillett, that had been in storage for what, 65 years. He then located himself and his entire crew. Absolutely amazing. It was moments like that that made our entire effort worthwhile. Of interest is the fact that famous actor Jimmy Stewart served as a pilot in the 703rd Squadron of the 445th. Jimmy Stewart starred in such movies as It's a Wonderful Life, The Glenn Miller Story, How the West Is Won, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and the Strategic Air Command, which he had first-hand knowledge of as he achieved the rank of Brigadier General in the Air Force Reserves. My father actually fished with Jimmy Stewart on Guam during the 60s. We hope that you enjoyed that episode, and we hope that you come back for our next entries.